when it's Friday night and you're at home by yourself, do you feel lonely? You're not the only one. How in the world do we overcome this gnawing feeling called loneliness? Well, if you want to find some freedom in your life and a little bit more contentment in your spiritual life, don't miss today's episode where we tackle that crazy feeling that we call loneliness.
Hi, welcome to the Binmin podcast. We know that the Christian life can be hard to figure out, but we also believe that everyone should know the next step for making their Christian life more important to them. I'm Pops.
I'm Bob.
I'm Rachel. Binmin stands for But If Not Ministry. And just like the three men thrown into the fiery furnace in Daniel chapter 3, we all need to be ready for our but if not moment, when we need to know and take our next steps in our spiritual life, no matter what others say.
In today's episode, I want to start out by saying very clearly, you are not alone. But we're going to spend this entire podcast dealing with the issue of loneliness.
And to kick us off, Dad is actually going to be singing the song Only the Lonely from the 1960s. So take it away, Dad.
Or one is the loneliest number?
Yes, and I want to share with both of you that I have an enormity of hidden talents
Yes.
that I have not shown. This is not one. No, this is not one of them that I'm ever going to subject anyone, except my granddaughters and my grandson, to. They're the only ones that appreciate my Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. So
They do. Yes, we'll release that as a special audio-only episode. Pop sings the 60s. There
that's
you
right.
go.
That's right. So Rachel, let me ask you: is loneliness a big deal?
Yes, Pops. It's a very big deal. In 2023, the U.S. described it as an epidemic that is not just for the U.S., but globally.
Okay.
They also released a 72-page advisory document about it. And Pops, I know you like stats. You want to hear a little bit more?
As long as it's not the full 72 pages. Yeah. I would
No. I'll keep it high level.
Okay.
Surgeon General knows how to write things. There you go.
So I'm gonna read through a couple of them.
Yeah.
Loneliness and lacking connection can increase the risk for premature death to levels comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Ooh.
The report also found that before COVID-19 pandemic, about half of the U.S. adults reported experiencing measurable levels of loneliness.
Whoa.
And it warns that there can be big physical consequences of poor connection, including experiencing a 29% increased risk of heart disease, a 32% increased risk of stroke, and a 50% increased risk of developing dementia for older adults.
Yeah. And just listening to those three things, really thank you, family, and thank you both for keeping me involved and this ministry for helping me not to feel lonely in this phase in my life. It really is great.
Yeah. But it's not just older people either, right?
Yeah, let me add one last point, right? So over the last 20 years, we have found that people are spending significantly less time with people, specifically 70% less social interactions over the last 2 decades.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's really wild to me. That's really wild. 70% less social interactions than just 20 years ago. That's really hard to hear.
Well, let me ask you then, Bob, what thoughts do you have as a pastor when it comes to how should we be viewing and dealing, well, and especially young adults, dealing with this epidemic?
Yeah, well, I mean, loneliness plays a big part of my story. I got married when I was 31, so I had the whole decade of my 20s as a single person, and I definitely didn't cope with my own loneliness always in a healthy way. You know, that's just the reality of my own journey. So I think one of the things that we have to acknowledge from the outset today is that there isn't necessarily just one easy answer to loneliness or what to do about it, but I think in fact there's a constellation of factors that are going to help us be healthy people and engage in all of these pieces of our life that are going to move us into greater freedom. So I think that needs to be said from the outset.
Then I'm going to put you on the spot once again. What recommendation, or are there habits or habit that you would recommend for people in dealing with loneliness, since you've experienced it so powerfully firsthand?
Yeah. So let me talk one habit. I think one is form deep connections. And I say that kind of specifically because as an extrovert, one of my temptations is I can be tempted to go wide, but not necessarily deep. So I can be friendly to a barista, but I don't necessarily call up a good buddy of mine when I'm really struggling with something, when that's exactly what I should be doing, right? So that's on me, but that habit is going to end up stoking loneliness.
And Bob, what do you mean by deep connections?
Yeah, well, I guess two pieces that would characterize something as the deep connection would be relationships of vulnerability and consistency. So examples like, this is the sister in Montana that you call up every other week to catch up on how you guys are both feeling in life. Or this is the accountability group of guys that you meet with every Thursday morning at 6 a.m. to actually talk about your struggles and how you're feeling. Or this is the small group leader that you're asking kind of vulnerable, intentional questions about your dating life to, so you can get some wisdom. Can I cash in on those two ingredients real quick?
Yeah.
Pops?
I was worried because you just said a sister in Montana. I didn't even know I had a child that was living in
Yes,
Montana.
you don't. Those are all hypothetical.
Okay, all right.
And I'm no longer dating. I'm married. So those are all hypothetical situations, just to be clear.
It's okay. It's just that it shocked
I would
Mom.
love to know someone in Montana, though, by the way, if you're watching or listening,
let's
because I
move
would
it
love to
along here.
visit.
Okay.
Since those were hypothetical, Bob, why don't you give us some real ones?
Yes, thank you for keeping us on track. So kind of on those two ingredients, vulnerability and consistency. Vulnerability means that I actually share what's really going on inside of me. I'm sharing my feelings, my struggles, my joys, my questions, right? I'm vulnerable. Consistency means I keep reaching out and I'm committing to being a good friend to them. So, and the hope here is that some of these relationships will reciprocate. And they'll also be vulnerable. They'll also be consistent with you, which ends up making them deep. Not everyone's going to do that, but the ones that do, it'll become deep. And I'm at least doing my part first to lead on that.
Are you comfortable sharing some specific examples?
Yeah, I can think of a couple. One is I have a good buddy that I went to college with. We were roommates. And we reconnected a couple years ago, even though he lives super far away, and just said one Saturday a month, we're going to do a phone call and we're just going to get real with each other and talk about real life. And that's now happened over the course of about 3 or so years. And it's immensely life-giving to me to be that real with someone who we have that much water under the bridge with. But a second one would also be the relationships with the dudes who are in my small group. So even though our small group meets kind of weekly or so in differing formats, these become guys who we've committed to once a month having a guys' night. Where again, it's 50-50 whether or not we just play a board game or whether we kind of go deep. But we are committed, generally speaking, to go deep in each other's lives. And even outside of those times, we're on a text thread with one another, checking in. We're committed to regularly pray for one another. And those are going to be my top guys when I have an opportunity to, again, I have 2 toddlers, so I'm not hanging out every night. Sure. But when I have a chance to hang out with a friend, they're going to be on the top of my list.
That's awesome. Rachel, let me put you on the spot. Do you have any recommendations? Do you have any habits or ideas how to overcome loneliness?
Yeah, one of the habits is healthy rhythms. And what that means or looks like is when you are thinking about your day, your week, even your year, what are you doing that is life-giving, that is curbing this loneliness, right? What are you doing that sets you up for success and doesn't let you just wallow in it? Yeah. So if you feel lonely consistently on a Friday night, be the friend that reaches out and plan something for Friday nights. Because we already saw that so many people feel lonely. Yeah. So someone else is just waiting for you to reach out. If you feel that you're really lonely late at night, well, go to bed earlier, right? Because when you get tired, your emotions start going. Yeah. If you are struggling with sexual sin or you're feeling really lonely, send a group text, go work out, go for a walk, but change whatever is making you feel that way, right? Put guardrails in place. A couple examples specifically, if I may.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
So there are 4. So we've talked about different rhythms, right? And sometimes people are like, rhythm? I don't have any capacity in my life to add a new thing. And so I have 4 that came to mind when I thought about what rhythms have I put into place.
Oh, bring it on. Let's
looking at different cadences. So I have a weekly dinner with some college roommates that live in town. That dinner is, the only expectation is that we show up however we are.
Nice.
Sometimes that means we're having fun, we're joking, we're talking about trips or family or life, whatever. Other times, we're in the heart of it, right? We are talking about really intense things because that's what life demands.
Right.
So that would be my weekly rhythm. I have a bi-weekly, which is my small group.
Oh, nice.
So we meet every other week, and those are a group of individuals, singles, marrieds, young kids, grown kids, because I know that one of my rhythms is to learn from people in a different life stage. Then I have monthly, which, fun enough, coincides with Bob's Guys Night. One of my very dear friends and her toddler hang out when her husband goes to Guys Night with Bob in small group.
I love that.
And then the final one would be a daily habit.
Yeah.
On my commute or when I'm walking my pup, I call a friend. Sometimes, or family member. Sometimes that call is 5 minutes because that's all the capacity we have.
Right.
Sometimes it's hours because we have more time. But it is that way to connect, right? And it's often a different friend every time or family member, but it is a way to check in with people.
That's awesome.
Man, I love your intentionality. Those are really helpful.
Yeah.
What so Pops, to ding it over to you, what would be maybe one last habit that could help us find some freedom from loneliness?
Yeah, I've thought about this. And knowing we were going to talk about this, I'm going to say something that's very counterintuitive.
Oh, man.
And that's the spiritual discipline of solitude.
So if you're feeling lonely, go hang out alone?
Right. No. No. Go watch our spiritual discipline video and read my blog.
Yeah, there you go.
It is being alone, but it's being alone with God. And
Yeah, cash that out.
yeah, so 20 years ago, even though I was in practicing 40 patients a day, very busy life with 4 children, I really did feel very lonely. And so one aspect of my life that I was able to add that was so powerful was that getting up early in the morning, there just was no one else around. I still do that now, even though it's just Mom and I. But I would do my Bible reading, my Bible study, my memorization. I'd then spend time in prayer, and then I just spent time waiting in solitude to hear from the Lord. Now, I have to tell you, times would vary depending on how much time I had. What I would hear or receive from the Lord varied as well. But I promise you, it has proven to me, and it's been probably more than 2 decades, but I face the day, it is some of the most rich and enjoyable time that I spend each and every day, so that I can face the day, I don't know, prepared for whatever I'm going to face.
That's such a really good long-term perspective, and I'm sure it builds up over time.
Yeah. And just one other thing. I'm glad you said that, because it did remind me. I don't want people listening or hearing this and then getting discouraged if they expect to spend an hour in solitude.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
You know what?
Yeah.
Actually, when I started, it was just a couple of minutes, right? And then you just build up in time. But we need to bring this podcast to a close. So we're at that point where I'm going to ask you, Bob, give us a call to action. What is it that you want listeners and viewers to take away from this podcast as their next step?
Yeah. What's your next step? Find some solitude. So, per Dad's recommendation, you have an opportunity every day to carve out some time with you and the one who knows you most intimately, the one that there will never be any deeper relationship with than, and that is God himself, who unconditionally loves you. It may seem counterintuitive to spend time alone, but remember, solitude means time alone with God. So over the next few weeks, either spend 5 to 10 minutes in silence a day for about 5 days, just 5 or 10 minutes if you can. It's hard, you're going to feel distracted, but just put all devices and things away. Or over this next month, carve out 2 hours, a 2-hour chunk to truly have solitude. No device, no other people around, and spend it just with God. And you'll be amazed to feel and sense and know God being with you and displaying his love to you. This isn't an easy habit to cultivate. It takes time, and like any other practice or exercise, you'll grow into it. But let us know what you did, and let us know how it went. We love hearing you, whether that's from comments here on the episode or on our socials. We always want to hear what's going on with you.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Thank you, Rachel. And thank you for joining us for this episode of the Binmin podcast. We know that the Christian life can be hard to figure out, but we also believe that everyone should know their next step for making their Christian life more important to them. Binmin is a resource ministry dedicated to helping you discover those next steps.
You can check out other episodes and also the show notes to this episode on binmin.org. While you're there, you're going to want to sign up for the newsletter where you can find just the best way to get updates, inside scoops, first looks on things, and kind of what's going on with the ministry, whether how you can help or finding your own next step in your spiritual life. Also, make sure to subscribe and like whatever platform you're listening or watching this to, and follow us on our socials for bite-sized bits, the quickest way to help you push toward your next step. Thanks for joining us today. We love spending the time with you. We'll see you next time. God bless.